Hockey. That's it. That's the episode. We say bye to first round eliminated teams. Plus, NCHC Commissioner Josh Fenton joins us to talk about the college hockey landscape. Episode 36 is right now.
As always, Bardown Beauties is presented by SodaStick.com, where you can snag all the coolest gear for the Minnesota sports fan in your life. Hats, tees, and hoodies in original designs celebrating your favorite Minnesota sports moments. You'll find at SodaStick.com. Use code Bardown Beauties at checkout for free shipping. Be a beaut with SodaStick. Hello, everybody. We're back. Episode 36. 36. More hockey talk. Alexis, first round playoffs. Dunzo, we said bye-bye to quite a few teams. We're recording this ahead of Vancouver, St. Louis finishing their series and ahead of Montreal, Philly concluding theirs. But everybody else knows who's moving on, knows who's not. I know you're heartbroken. Do you want me to cue the violin?
Right off the bat, you're going to do this to me? Come on. You couldn't even give me a second to get settled.
Nope. Let's go. Did you shed a tear for Torts? Pour one out for Torts and the Columbus Blue Jackets.
So many were poured out for Columbus and John Tortorella. That was pretty tragic. I get the Wild taken away from me, and then I'm like, at least I have John Tortorella, and now I get John Tortorella taken away from me. It's just, we can't have anything good, apparently. And that I thought was one of the more fun series was that Columbus and Bolts series, just because they had like the history from last year, obviously, where Torts swept them, and that was kind of a big deal, obviously, because they're the first seed, and then you get to this these playoffs and you've got the dramatic, Maple Leafs and Columbus series. I'm like, okay, some of that energy has got to carry over into this series. And we did get a little bit of it. It was pretty intense series, even though it was done in 5 games. And yeah, really sad finish because the Bolts were up 2-0.
Yeah.
Columbus scores 4 goals to make it 4-2. Then all of a sudden it's tied and we're going into overtime and then they can't pull out the win. And I'm just like, what a roller coaster. I mean, it was a fun game, but really upsetting that Columbus couldn't get the win.
I think you've seen the parity is just, it's so bizarre because you have teams that are like that where, like you said, you have a lead. You look at Calgary and Dallas last night in their elimination game, right? Like Calgary's up 3-0. And in the final 40 minutes, Dallas scores 6 straight. Like you have so much of that. You either have that, right, which is super exciting, super fun as a fan, right? You hope you're tuning in for the whole game so you can catch that. Or you have a Colorado-Arizona situation where it's just domination. Like I knew Colorado, right, coming into this, phenomenal. Like just no mercy. Like, nope, we're going to put up 7 on you, not once, but twice in this series. Like, okay, oh my God.
Let's take this step by step for a second. Let's cover that Calgary and Stars game on Thursday night because so like we said, we're recording this Friday, so this was a fresh game for us here. Yeah. I watched that game, and the Flames go up 3-0, and you're like, oh, this is going to be a lame game, landslide, right? Like, can Dallas really come back from this? They're on the brink already. Then it's all of a sudden 7-3, and I'm like, what happened in this game? And I wanted Calgary to win that series because Norm Green sucks, so we don't root for Dallas in this household. I wanted Calgary to win that series, and Dallas is a Central Division team, so whatever. And when they went up 3-0, I was like, oh sweet, like this is going to be a pretty easy game. And at a certain point when it was like 5-3 Dallas, I was like, I kind of want Dallas to just score like 10 more goals. Like at this point, like might as well just pile it on because already they've just been relentless since they came back.
I want to see a 10-goal game too.
That's what I'm saying. I'm like, you know what?
Oh, yeah.
I'm not rooting for Dallas, but I kind of want this to just be a landslide at this point. So that game was exciting. And then
I love how they panned to Kachuk too, who obviously wasn't able to play. And you could just see like the disappointment. He's like, what the hell just happened, right? Like, I mean, imagine how frustrating that is for a guy like him, where he would be a game changer in that situation too, and to like have to watch and be like, it's not just a comeback, it's an embarrassing comeback, right? Like you just forgot to finish the game out. Like you just thought this was it. We only need to score 3 goals right away. Like
that's what I'm saying. I'm like, at what point did you just turn the switch off and you're like, that's it. We're just going to coast through the remaining 45 minutes of this game. Like, I don't know.
If you've seen a hockey game, that's not how that generally works.
My dad and I were watching this and at the end of the game, Kenny Alberts was talking about their statistician fed them a stat where they were like, it's the first time in NHL history a team was up 3-0 and was down 4 goals in the same game. My dad and I laughed for like 3 minutes because Kenny Alberts was just like laying it on the Flames. Like he's like listing everything that went wrong in that game.
It was to this
so
league.
Funny.
You are now an AHL team. We don't want you around.
Like the Talbot and Riddick like drama, like pulling Talbot, then putting him back in the net. Like that game was so much fun to watch for being a 7-3 game just because of the craziness of it. Like,
well, and Calgary to me is almost kind of a little bit like the Devils, right? Like they've had the ability to put some of those pieces together and they can't figure it out for the life of them. Again, goaltending, huge issue for them this year, and they've had some injuries too, but it's like, what's going on there? Like, what are you guys doing in Calgary? I can't quite figure that one out. Go ahead. Go ahead.
I was just going to touch really quick. You talked about parity and that Colorado Arizona series. Every time someone asks me like, who do you think is going to win this series? Who do you think is going to win the cup? Who do you think is going to go to the conference finals? I'm like, this year more than ever, I have absolutely no idea who's going to make it. Like you could, I have like ideas of who I'm like cheering for and like who has good pieces. But like at the end of the day, I'm like, I have no clue. We just saw a team give up 7 goals in two separate games in the playoffs. Like that doesn't happen in the playoffs. And we've had a lot of
when Arizona looked good in the play-in. Like they were a team that I think I picked that series to go 7 because I was like, I think Arizona's better. Yeah.
And Darcy Kemper was put on a pedestal after what was it, like game 2 or 3? They were like, Darcy Kemper, all hail Darcy Kemper. And then all of a sudden it's like the series just completely gets out of hand. And I don't know how. I mean, it's crazy. And every time somebody asks me like, what do you think? Who's going to win? Who's going to do this? I'm like, I don't know. I genuinely don't know. Like I can give you stats. I can give you like who I want to win, but I have no idea how it's actually going to play out.
I mean, we know it's Vegas. Like, no, just kidding. There were a couple I mean, again, they exposed Chicago for the team that we'd seen all season. We talked a little bit about that last week. And so no surprise that series ended up the way it did. But there were some nights where Vegas didn't look as great as they had to. And of course, you're going to have those off nights. And again, where things are so different now. But I still really like that. Although Colorado, goddamn, like I don't know.
Okay, and even look at like in the broadcast last night for the Dallas and Calgary game, they were mentioning how Dallas was now going to play Colorado in the next round, and they brought up the stat that Dallas swept Colorado in the regular season. And somebody, I can't remember who it was, it might have been Bush on the broadcast, was like, "That was so long ago, you cannot even take that into consideration." Like that was half a year ago.
Yeah, like
he
the
was like, "That stat is
Vancouver.
irrelevant."
Look at how that worked out. Like,
I mean, so it's just like it's crazy. You can't predict anything. It's a free for all basically.
No, I do feel a little bit for Ovi because Ovi made the series interesting by coming through and like turning into the machine that he is, so they weren't swept by the New York. I was going to say New England, the New
Patriots.
York Islanders. But I like the Islanders. I've always kind of had this little soft spot, and I don't know if it's because I love Anders Lee. Like he's one of my favorite Minnesota guys that play in the NHL.
Yeah.
But I like what they have going on there, and I've wanted to see that click for them. They got Brock Nelson out there too, another Minnesota kid. Nick Leddy, we all know much about him.
Just laying it on thick.
But no, I'm happy to see them advance. I mean, I like Washington. They've always been my favorite Eastern team, but I would like to see what the Islanders can do.
I love Washington because I love Ovechkin. He's by far one of my favorite non-Minnesota Wild players. Just love his compete. Obviously, he's one of the best players in the world all time. And the Capitals overall are just a fun team to watch usually. The Islanders, that was a series that I didn't care too much. Like I wanted the Capitals to win, but I didn't have too much. I thought either team could have won that series. It didn't seem like a sure thing for either team. I just have a hard time rooting for the Islanders. You guys won like 87 Stanley Cups in the 80s. Like, I'm sorry, I'm not really cheering for you to win anymore in the near future. Like, give it maybe another decade and then I'll get on the bandwagon. But I love Alex Ovechkin and the Capitals so much.
You weren't even born in the 80s. It's a new life for you.
I still know things. The internet exists. I can Google. But yeah, obviously the Capitals not too far removed from winning the Stanley Cup. And I told my dad last night, I said, the thing that's crazy about the NHL, because my dad was like, it's so hard to come back to the Stanley Cup and win the Stanley Cup. I mean, look at the Blues are on the brink of losing here. The Capitals are out and they're 2 years removed from winning. And I said, the crazy thing is that the Capitals team that they won the Stanley Cup with is nearly the same team that they have right now.
I mean,
different coach and a few minor players that have been moved around, but as far as like their superstars go and the majority of like their top 6 and all that, that's all the same. And they're out of the playoffs 2 years in a row now since winning the Cup. So it's kind of crazy how hard it really is to have a good team, have some of the best players in the league. I mean, we talked about the Maple Leafs. Oh my gosh, I can't talk.
Did you want to puke your mouth when you said the Maple Leafs? Like those poor teams?
Look at a team like the Maple Leafs who has some of the stars in the league and they can't get through the playoffs. I mean, it's crazy that the NHL allows for that much parity, and it really makes it so fun to watch because you truly do never know who's going to win and who's going to lose and all of that. So,
well, I mean, and you mentioned coaching. I love me some Barry Trotz, right? And clearly he knows how to lead a team to success because now he's with the Islanders and they're moving on. So there's something about him that he can just get guys going. So, I mean, I think that is definitely a big piece of the puzzle, not to say that the teams that are out. I love Mike Sullivan of Pittsburgh and guys like that too, but it is interesting. Again, that makes you wonder, is Dean the guy here in Minnesota to lead the team to the promised land? I don't know. It's not fair to assess him after this one playoff run, but I think that the way guys show up differently in playoffs and how you can coach that and put that passion towards something is something to be considered too.
Yeah. And I mean, is there a better person to defeat the Capitals and Alex Ovechkin than Barry Trotz? I mean, that was like the ultimate matchup.
Bruce
for Barry Trotz.
He would be my next pick. I would love for him because I think I would be curious to see how he reacted to that, right? Because he has such a soft spot in his heart for Washington, and he loved it there, like everyone knows. But shout out, Bruce. What's up? Miss you.
Yeah, miss you.
And speaking kind of also, you had touched on how different broadcasts have been. We have to talk about it because it was said. Can Mike Milbury just shut up? Like, I just kind of want to beat him with his own shoe, which would be such sweet irony, right? Like, just get him back. Milbury's always just kind of been Milbury, right? Same with JR. Like for me, they've just been kind of there. Don't get too worked up. Even Milbury's comment, which during the broadcast he had off the cuff had just kind of said, oh yeah, the guys aren't distracted by women in the bubble. I don't think he meant it maliciously. I will say, I mean, it wasn't something that I was like, oh, pick it. It's so stupid. Like, what? It's so unnecessary. Similar to the comment he made earlier on in the play-in series about no fans equating to women's college hockey, right? Yeah. Like, it's those little comments that if you say them off the side to your buddies, whatever, you're on national TV saying these things, and it's like, you can't, like, just shut your mouth. Like,
and even if like the thing is like, A, you shouldn't think that to begin with, and B, even if you do think that, like you said, do you really think that's the appropriate thing to say on national television? Like, you are entitled to your opinions, and if you have a certain opinion, so be it. Like you said, neither of those were like malicious like attacks on anybody,
right?
But at the same time,
he meant it jokingly, and he just kind of said it and he's older too, and again, not to always give older guys a pass, but I get like that's what they don't understand, like how that can be taken in a negative way, right? Like,
people kept saying on Twitter, which is so true, they were like, there is women in the bubble, like there's women working these games, there's women who are around these players, so you're either saying that those women aren't distractions because they're working in the sport, so they're not the girls the guys are going after, or you're basically just ignoring the fact that women work in sports, which is, I think, more problematic. I don't know what the biggest issue is here. There's just like a few things to touch on about that where it's just like, why would you say that? If you wanted to say, and I saw people saying this too, which I agree with, if you wanted to go the route of like, oh, their families aren't here, or their friends aren't here, so there's I understand the point he was making about no distractions.
And we've written about that here, right? Like, because Jason Zucker, there's the big thing where he played better on the road, and the joke was, well, he's not with Carly, and of course that was all joking, and I mean, it is kind of that similar manner, right? Like, it is probably harder to be home and you've got different responsibilities and to get your naps in.
But to equate it down to just women being the issue is where the problem is. It's like the distraction thing, I have no problem with him making the statement about no distractions and yada, yada, yada. But to say that women are the issue, or that if there was women around, the men couldn't, like, how does everyone else function in their jobs with women? I mean, like, literally, like, everyone
Please don't let my recorder or my knowledge and passion of the game distract you from my breasts, my exquisite breasts. Like,
it's just so confused. It's like, why, what are we doing here? Like, why would you think that? And I don't know. And like you said, Milbury is Milbury, and it's just like some of the stuff he says, it's like, do you not think about the things that you're saying and the way that it might affect some people who are watching these sports or working in these sports? And I don't know, it's just, it seems it's a little disrespectful. And, you know, it's not, I also think it's not fair to the players to say like, oh, they can't,
that they're just Neanderthals that can't control themselves. Like, that was to me. And again, it's the way he said it. Like I said, it made a woman feel like a sex object, right? Like because they're not here and because these guys aren't thinking about sex all the time. It's like, I get we all think about it, men and women, right? Like we think about, but it's when you're there to do a job, I don't think it's on your mind anyway. And it kind of, for me, you had mentioned there are women in the bubble. There are women working in the bubble, but it's like, again, goes to, you either are a female that works hard and is good at her job, but you're probably frumpy and you're not attractive, or you're gorgeous and that's all you can do. And it can never be both. And that's something that's always driven me nuts, right? Because I want to look good too, but I know I can know sports at the same time. Like it doesn't have to be one or the other. And I always fear that for young girls that are coming up, like, girls, you can still look pretty and still look sexy or feel cute and sexy and go and know about the goddamn game that is happening. And you can do both and not have to feel bad about that. And sometimes I think it's like you're one or the other, and that's not the case. Like, and again, I'm looking good for myself. Sorry guys. Like it really has nothing to do with you. Like I want to look cute and I want to feel sexy because I want to. And also, I could still tell you about the power play and I could still tell you, rip off the stats. Like that doesn't change anything.
If I showed up to work, for anyone who's watching the YouTube version of this, if I showed up to work looking like this, my boss would be like, can you like go put a dress on or like put some makeup on or like put your hair down? Like also it's a job. Just like if you go to an office, like you have to look nice. You have to, you know, be presentable. I can't show up in my pajamas. I can't show up in sweatpants. Like that's just like men have to wear suits and ties and all of that. It's like, that's just part of the job. And if you are either saying that, you know, if you look that way, you're just an object to these men. And if you don't, you're not desirable and you're useless. That's so problematic. And it's really annoying. And like you said, it by him saying that, whatever he meant by it, I'm not going to put words in his mouth and say, oh, he might've meant this or he might've meant that, because we don't know. But when he says it, it comes off as making women seem like nothing other than objects to these men, which is disrespectful to the men, like you said, for making them seem like all they care about is women and sex and all of that. And it's disrespectful to the women for making it sound like they're useless for anything but that. And it's just, I don't know. I hate that we even have to be talking about it. It's like, just
again,
stop.
I am so sick of talking about it, because you guys know our opinion, right? Like we don't get triggered by a lot. Like it's just quit, just shut the heck up. You know, and again, I think the thing that it bothered me more, it's like, because you've already said the women's college hockey comment, like let's move on. We get that you don't think women can do much. So just say it off air, whatever. If that's the way you feel, and it's frustrating again, because it's setting women back. Again, like little comments like that, the more people say those things, and especially to a national audience, the more it sets things back. Like just stop saying them out publicly anyway, like whatever.
He literally works with women on these broadcasts.
Yes, like Mazzacco, and she's the best. Like it's just so crazy. It's happened, and it's crazy. You know, kind of terrible segue, but speaking of sad things in hockey and in college hockey, Alaska Anchorage unfortunately announces that their men's hockey program will be disbanded after this upcoming season, the 2021 season. Longtime members of the WCHA, our guest is Mr. Josh Fenton of the NCHC. So we'll talk a lot of college hockey future and outlook with him. But it's, you know, I know Alaska has been kind of on a rough spot, them and Fairbanks as well, just with the travel alone. And that's in a regular year. You know, it's hard for teams to spend the money. Usually college teams can bus to a lot of places, right? Especially college hockey, when the money's not really there in a lot of programs. I mean, you have the U and some of those Big Ten schools that support it fully, but it's hard for a lot of small programs. So to have to fly to Alaska, which is not cheap. I have flown to Alaska when I was a kid. It's expensive for one ticket for one person. So it's just a bummer. And again, it's a bummer to see a college hockey program fold, especially in an area where it'd be great to see hockey grow a little bit.
Yeah, it's, you know, again, we've talked about a few of these stories, and what was it, Alabama Huntsville, who was resurrected shortly after saying that they were done with their...
Maybe that'll happen. Maybe we'll put that good mojo in the air.
but it's just, we knew that these kind of stories were going to be coming out of this pandemic and this pause and this return to play, and especially at the lower levels like college, where they don't have the money to put into these sports and don't have the money to obviously give these players, because they're college athletes, they're not professionals and all of this. So it is sad, because especially when you see it at places like that, where it's like, it's not Minnesota where you have 100 college hockey teams. It's a place like Alaska where it's few and far between to have these teams competing against some of these other states and colleges. So it's disappointing. The positive thing about something like that is it's a lot easier to resurrect that than if it was at the professional level. Like if, for whatever reason in the Wild, we're like, yep, we're done packing up, goodbye, like that's it. Again, RIP North Stars. It would be a lot harder to bring that back because there's so much more that goes into it. So the nice thing about the college level is that, a few years down the road, they could say, now we have the money for it, let's bring it back, let's build a team, yada, yada, yada. But it is disappointing because it takes opportunities away from these players. It takes opportunities away from coaching staff and all of that. And for people who just want to watch hockey, who go to that school and are like, I want to have a hockey team to cheer for. So yeah, it's disappointing, but hopefully we'll give them the Alabama-Huntsville bump and hope they can resurrect the program at some point in the near future.
Exactly. No, it is. It's always disheartening to see any program fold or struggle. And it's tough, especially now. I mean, it was tough for them before. Again, they were up and down and were they going to survive? And they were able to survive. And the WCHA kind of helped them do that. So, and again, when you lose a program in a conference, that also kind of shakes the conference foundation too, right? So it's kind of like, what does this mean? One card could lead to another, because now it's, how many teams do we have in our conference who can fill that spot? And it's hard to sustain. We're going to take a quick break and we will be back to talk more college hockey, more conference college hockey, the future, all of that good stuff with NCHC Commissioner Josh Fenton. Stay tuned.
In addition to our presence in the Soda Stick store, we've got even more Beauties merch available in our Bardown Beauties Teespring collection. Wear a custom-designed 5-hole Bardown tank while feeding your babe in an official Beauties onesie and sipping from your Bardown Beauties coffee mug. We've got it all. Go check it out and support the Beauties.
Now joining us, another former Iowa State alum who continues to prove Cyclones grow up to two truly great things. The best college hockey commish on the scene, National Collegiate Hockey Conference head honcho, Josh Fenton. How's that for an intro, Josh?
Wow, I like the Iowa State portion of that. When I do these things, nobody ever recognizes that aspect of it. So thank you for mentioning that.
Always a cyclone power every day that I can sneak it in. So I'm all for that. How are things? How are you holding up amidst the crazy as we start to see a little bit of a new normal in respects of areas?
Yeah, I mean, we're doing fine. We're doing great, actually. Our family, as I said, you're talking to me from the Fenton family basement. So, obviously we haven't kind of fully transitioned back into the office every single day. Our staff is in there. We have a limited, smaller staff, as most college hockey conferences do, but it's basically one person in the office per day during the week, other than Fridays. So, there's really not a huge need for us to all be in there at once. So it's worked out, and I've kind of commandeered a spare bedroom in our basement that's now become my office. But, we're hanging in there, and we've had a little bit of youth sports happening in our family this summer, which has been good to help our boys return to some sense of normalcy. But school's cranking up next week, so we're excited for that too.
I just got to say, Josh, before we get into our first question here, your Fenton family basement is a lot better than my Alexis bedroom floor setup that I have going on. So don't feel too bad. You still have the better setup between you and me, at least. So
this is true. This is very, very
I think
true.
Yours looks great, Alexis.
You like my wooden bedroom doors?
I love
here?
it. Yeah. What I haven't done, I know Jessi and her style in the background there. Look at her. She's got the state of Minnesota, a couple different plants there. And I just haven't quite gotten to, even though I've been in this situation for a while, like 4 or 5 months now, to actually put bookshelves behind me,
right.
Put books that you pretend to read.
All your degrees.
All your degrees.
Yeah.
Yeah. I haven't quite gotten there. I've got one picture over my shoulder here that I actually haven't even gotten up on the wall.
I was going to say, next step hanging. That'll be in the next month or two, right?
Exactly.
I will say this setup did not come until maybe a month ago. Prior to that, it was in my bedroom as well, and I didn't realize I should just move and come into a more open space. So
Well, I love, as a proud Minnesotan, I love seeing that in the back.
Yeah, exactly. Let's talk a little bit about the NCHC. You've really turned that into one of the most desirable Division I conferences in the country. I mean, simple question: how? What went into making the NCHC the reality that it is and the powerhouse that it is?
Well, I think it starts with, and it always will be, with the member institutions that are in the conference and how they approach their kind of lives in the hockey business. We've been fortunate to have an incredible amount of competitive success on the ice. Unfortunately, we didn't have an NCAA tournament this past year, but as everybody knows, we won the last 4 national championships. And so, we certainly don't take credit for goals scored or saves made in the conference office. That doesn't happen in our business. That happens with the great student athletes, coaches that are leading them, of all 8 member programs. So, Jessi, I think, to be honest with you, it's the solidarity and the commonality that come with each of our programs. I think we act and kind of do things as one. And everybody's kind of doing things for what's in the best interest of the conference. Now, having said that, we've got a great staff in our conference office. Our director of communications, Michael Wiseman, is outstanding on social. He's outstanding in just the external communications world. And I think some of that type of things have really separated ourselves and made us kind of a desirable location. And then our tournament championship, being built into a desirable, want to play in type of weekend in St. Paul at XL Energy Center with the Frozen Face-Off. Those are things that we can sell. And so, we've tried to complement, obviously, what's happening on the ice surface from a competitive standpoint with things that we can bring to the table to elevate the profile, so to speak, of the conference.
So when the Big Ten expansion happened, what was your initial thoughts on that? Did you think that, and do you think it still is a good thing for the sport?
So Big Ten expansion, we're almost 10 years into really when people found out and kind of heard that Big Ten hockey was coming. It came with Penn State adding a program. And I think, the kind of the rumblings that were becoming true happened in the late half of the year in 2010. And so, like I said, we're coming up on 10 years, which is hard to believe. In terms of, kind of how that changed the landscape. That changed the landscape because ultimately the Big Ten had 6 institutions that had men's ice hockey, and that's the magical number in the eyes of the NCAA to have a conference in the conference tournament and qualification into the NCAA tournament. So I think everybody realized that at that point that was coming, and so we all needed to do what we needed to do to try to think of, okay, what's next and what do we do, and obviously a collection of schools, and I was at one of them at the time, Miami University, came together and said, we've got a group of schools that have a high level of commitment to hockey. We think there's some commonality here. Let's think differently. Let's form a conference that we think can be one of the best in the country. And ultimately that's what came in the early part of 2011, and we announced it in the middle of 2011, and then we were off and running in the 13-14 season. So ultimately it's worked out well and nicely for us from a competitive standpoint. I think there are things that we always can continue to improve upon in the game. It's overall, there are some rivalries that have been a part of our game for a long time that maybe don't get to be played as much, whether that's in the East or in the West, whether it's CCHA rivalries or WCHA rivalries. And so, I think it's important for us to think about what those are and how can we continue to give the fans those types of experiences. And I give the schools credit. I think you're seeing some of those rivalries kind of come back, whether it's a Minnesota, North Dakota, Wisconsin, Duluth, those types of things, or even in the East, Western Michigan and Michigan State, Miami and Ohio State have played a few times. So those are important, but we also can continue to improve the game.
Well, and you kind of touched on it there, right? Hockey in general, but especially college hockey, they're traditionalists and they like what they like. They like the WCHA, they like their Hockey East, and don't you dare change it, right? And obviously with the expansion, you guys were able to come apart. What were some of the challenges that were presented with the NCHC being kind of the new kids on the block? And, despite having a lot of those former WCHA programs and the programs that people know in college hockey, but what challenges were presented in those early years for you guys?
Well, I think the biggest challenge was kind of what you said, that people were used to, whether it be a WCHA or CCHA mindset. you know, in the WCHA was I circled the weekend, third weekend of March to come down to St. Paul and have fun at the Final Five. And to a similar extent, maybe a little bit lesser extent, people were also doing that in the state of Michigan and Ohio when it was the CCHA championship at Joe Louis Arena. And I knew that tournament very well because we were there quite a bit with Miami University, and it was a great event. And so, you know, we had to then say, okay, you know, what has happened and who are we? And we had to try to tell our story. You know, people understood who the hockey programs were. They knew about the history and the tradition in North Dakota and Miami and other programs in our conference, but we had to kind of tell our story of, okay, why have these groups, the schools come together to form this conference? And so I think that was a challenge to start. But Jessi, to be honest with you, the luck that we had in it, and I will tell you it's luck, is that the programs themselves competed well on the ice surface. And so, you know, whether you want to give credit to the conference or whatnot, at the end of the day, the competitiveness was there. And then the competitiveness started to elevate even further on a national stage. Then we started to see national championships. So I think that really helped kind of tell our story and put us in a positive light just across the game overall. And then we complement it with the things that I already talked about in the conference office. But I think initially it was about kind of, you know, telling people that love the WCHA and love the CCHA, who are we and what are we about and what are we going to give you as a fan as an experience.
Oh, you mean 4 titles and 10 Frozen Four appearances and some Hobie Bakers are like a good thing for a conference, right?
Yeah, we'll take it for sure.
So when, you know, we talked a little bit about, you know, some of the excitement that came over these past 10 years and some of the challenges as well. But how rewarding was that first year after the NCHC was brought in? What were some of the joys that came at the end of that first season?
Well, I still think the most rewarding thing overall, and you have to keep in mind a little bit that I've kind of been with the conference really since almost day one, prior to the conference even being formed. So I was a part of Miami University. I was kind of the person through the athletic administration there that really led on behalf of Miami. And then I actually got very involved in facilitating athletic director meetings and, you know, how are we kind of continually moving the ball down the field, so to speak, to create the conference, announce the conference, get everything set up. So my point in saying that, Alexis, is, you know, the conference just formation, we were zero, we were nothing. It was started from ground zero, and we built it into, I guess, what it is today. And so that to me is incredibly rewarding. That first year, it was kind of, you know, doing everything for the first time and learning about everything for the first time, and a lot of missteps and a lot of things that I think we did well. But I remember very vividly when we got through our first tournament championship, which was at Target Center, kind of this, you know, sense of relief and, you know, exhaling and feeling a great sense of accomplishment that we had just completed our first season and thought we did it fairly well. You know, there were still some things that we definitely could do a lot better than we did, but just kind of getting through that first season, I think, was the most exhilarating part of it.
You mentioned just surviving is the best part, right?
For sure, yeah. That's you know what? That's a better word. That's a better word. Like here's a great example, and it's one of the parts of my job that frankly I just don't like, and you can understand why. Is that, you know, we have to handle player discipline. Mm-hmm. And, you know, incidents that happen on the ice, and hockey is so unique in that regard compared to any other sport in the NCAA. Like I can talk to basketball people and football people, and if they're suspending student athletes, it's because they've done something so obvious and blatant that it's like, well, no kidding, they need to be suspended. With hockey, we have judgment situations that go into on the ice surface about incidents that happen, and, you know, contact to the head, hit from behind, that type of thing. And so my point in mentioning it, we hadn't suspended a kid all year in the first year, and we finally had to do it. And it was, I would tell you, it was a no-brainer suspension. Yeah. But when we had to do it, I felt so terrible and so awful about doing it. But you get used to it, unfortunately. And, you know, that was just one thing during that year that was unique.
Keep your stick down, or don't. I mean, some of the simple things, right? Like,
right, absolutely.
Come on, guys, we don't want to do this. It's like talking to your kids. Like, I don't want to ground you, but you're not listening. Like, kind of that thing. You had mentioned Target Center was the first ever Frozen Face-Off, and I've been lucky enough to attend all the Frozen Face-Offs here in Minnesota, even from the Target Center to the X. Was Minnesota the natural choice for you, just knowing that the WCHA obviously no longer was hosting that? Was that your number one option?
Yeah, so we fairly early in the process, almost right after we announced the conference just being formed, which was July of 2011. We kind of got on this, okay, what are we doing from a conference tournament standpoint? And we looked at a variety of options, and I think the membership ultimately wanted a neutral site location, and we still feel that works out in our best interest. And from a centralized, where can we maximize on fan attendance with St. Cloud, Duluth, North Dakota, to some extent Omaha, kind of being around that area. That probably made the most sense. But we did have some other conversations about other markets like Denver, even Omaha. But at the end of the day, the Minneapolis-St. Paul market is the right market for us. But then we got into the process of, okay, where in that market? And, we had conversations with certainly Target Center. We had conversations with others. There were other tournaments that were still in certain venues like XL Energy Center. And so Target Center was incredibly aggressive and very open and really showing, hey, we want this event. We believe in what you're trying to do, and we want to be a part of your crown jewel at the end of the year. And so it just made sense, and it was a great fit to begin with. And so we were excited to go into Target Center.
Well, I remember too, it was interesting because the ice looked great. It was a really fun place to watch, but the Zamboni, I remember, had to take an elevator up to get to ice level. And it was just so unique and so amazing to watch that process because, again, I think people forget that you can have hockey or you can have ice at the Target Center. I think Disney on Ice has been there too. I mean, there's different things, but it was a really unique, very different experience. And it was a nice way to expose hockey into the Minneapolis area a little bit. It's always synonymous with St. Paul. So I think that was a really fun thing to see.
Yeah, it was. I would tell you the best part about Target Center were the people that we got to work with. Incredibly supportive, hardworking, do whatever it takes for your event to be successful type of people. A lot of those people have actually moved on to other jobs and are not there anymore. So, if I were to go in those walls today and kind of look around the administrative staff, I don't know that I would know many people, but those that were there at the time, so supportive. And to be honest with you, Jessi, when we made the decision to move in the summer of, I guess that was 17, to XL Energy Center, it was the hardest conversation that I've still had when I went and met with the people at Target Center. It was a tough conversation because of the relationships that we had developed and just everything that they had given to our championship, and we'll forever be grateful for that. But I think at the end of the day, it was kind of the right move in terms of the quote unquote hockey venue in the market. Our players aspire to play in the National Hockey League. It's the National Hockey League venue. I think one of the best, if not the best, in the National Hockey League. Certainly the staff at XL Energy Center with Jack Larson and Kelly McGrath and others are fantastic to work with. But it just was a natural move to kind of progress and move over to XL. But I can't say enough good things about the people and what we did at Target Center.
I mean, you can't beat West 7th during St. Patrick's Day when you guys have it. I know the North Dakota fans certainly love the full-blown green. Every time I go down there, I'm like, oh, it's just infested with North Dakota people because they're all wearing green. Everyone's supporting North Dakota. So it's always, as a Gopher fan, I have to say that I still.
Yeah, no, I understand. We were fortunate in 2018, our first championship actually fell on their St. Patrick's Day weekend. So it was like a perfect storm. We had Fan Fest outside. And I think actually probably at least half or more of the people that were in Fan Fest were there not because of hockey, they were there just because of a party on West 7th there. Mm-hmm. But hey, we were happy to take their money for the beer they wanted to buy and make the scene look like, hey, this is a great opportunity, great experience for the NCHC.
Now, Josh, I'm going to ask the question that everyone is wanting the answer to. Like just about every other season, when the pandemic hit, the college hockey season was cut short. Was Duluth going for a three-peat? Give us your hot take on that. What do you think?
Well, they were definitely going for a three-peat. They were going to be in the tournament. Whether they would have got there or not, I guess I don't know. Yeah, I would say this. I think they had a really good chance. You know, we had some incredibly good teams this past year on the national level. It was kind of a unique year. We had some pretty big separation from kind of top to bottom of our conference and just competitiveness, which you really haven't seen until we saw this year. So North Dakota, Duluth, and Denver, and then to a lesser extent Western Michigan. They were kind of up and down a little bit, but those three were, I would call, top 3 of 5 in the country. And so any of those three had a really legitimate chance to win it. And certainly Duluth being one of them, I think they had a chance to go for 3 in a row, which it's too bad. And I guess they're going to get the chance maybe hopefully this year. But you know, it has only happened one other time, and it happened in the 50s. Actually at the old Broadmoor Arena, which hosted the first 10 national championships, when Michigan won 3 in a row. And I mean, you talk about a different era of college hockey, right? And how hard it is to win back to back. I think the last back to back was Denver, and then maybe previous to that was Minnesota. So they had a chance. They definitely had a chance.
Well, I think our Duluth fans will be happy to hear that, because I know when the season ended, a lot of Duluth fans were up in arms that they didn't have a chance at the three-peat.
Or they just claimed it, I think, too, right? They're like, oh, well, we're just 3. I'm like, no, you're not. You can't do that. Bulldogs, come on now.
Well, and even I'll say North Dakota, you know, arguably, you know, Cornell would put up an argument on this, but arguably the number 1 team in the country for almost the entire season. And you think about it, North Dakota, the history and tradition of making NCAA tournaments, you know, they had gone a little bit of a stretch where they hadn't made one after they had made, I think it was 19 in a row before they missed it. And so Brad Berry and that staff got that team kind of back on track. Leadership obviously played a key role in the locker room, and they were rolling, and they were a tough team to play against. And it was kind of, you know, as North Dakota fans would say, North Dakota of old. And they were going to be there right at the end too. So it would have been fun, but unfortunately it didn't happen.
And to elaborate on that, I mean, how hard was that decision and to make that announcement, especially when you're thinking of these student athletes and, you know, the seniors that now don't get that opportunity? I mean, how difficult was that for your guys' office and just in general to see have to happen?
Well, Jessi, at the time, incredibly difficult decision, painful decision. In hindsight, a very easy decision. You know, after what we saw, you know, for even the couple days after that, when basically the world shut down, particularly the sports world shut down. You know, I think about obviously a great relationship with the people at XL Energy Center. The 4 days before that, and you two are in the market, so you get this, and I grew up there and I get it. They held that boys state hockey tournament over, 5 days or so, and had, you know, 17,000-ish people a day. And then like 3 days later, we just kind of came to an abrupt halt.
Yeah.
I mean, lucky on their part, I guess, that they got it in for the high school league of Minnesota. But like, that is how quickly our world changed. We went from an event like that to basically nothing.
Yeah.
And so I could tell you the information was coming by the minute in terms of, and we were trying to make decisions on the fly. It was very hard. I was in constant contact with the chair of our board, the chair of our AD group. It was hard to get groups together to talk about things because a lot of our schools were also in the middle of basketball tournaments, and those were falling kind of by the wayside. So it was a very, very hard decision. But you said something that I think is most important. The hardest part about that decision, and kind of as I reflected after the fact, was what was ripped away from the student athletes. I mean, you think about it, whether it's hockey, any other sport, male, female, this is what they do. This is what they love to do. And they want to compete. They want to showcase their skills. They want to be with their teammates, trying to kind of achieve that next level, achieve that next step. And when we got to that part of the year, we're talking about the postseason. This is
the most exciting part that you want.
This is what they play for. And basically a 24-hour span, we went from, we think we can play, we think we can play without fans, to no, we're not going to play.
Right.
And unfortunately, I was in my office making those decisions. But, I wish I could have been, kind of teleported, so to speak, to each location where our teams were located at the time, so I could tell them in person. So it was incredibly important, or incredibly devastating. And I just felt in particular for the seniors about the opportunity that was kind of taken away.
Right. Especially for some of them where there is no next level, not everybody's afforded that opportunity to go to the NHL or play professionally at any level. Sometimes that's kind of it, they want to win a national championship because they know that's where their career might end, as far as playing wise goes. So it's for me, that's always like, God, that would have sucked, as a never an elite athlete, you guys, but I certainly enjoyed my senior year sports and stuff like that too. So
I think it's a great point. I mean, because that's what happened with the entire spring, winter sports, spring sports, whether you're an elite level Division I college athlete, or, hey, I'm a women's tennis player on some high school team, and I love to play tennis, and it's my sport. And guess what? It didn't happen.
Right.
So it's sad. It really is sad.
Yeah, I know we talked a lot about that when everything kind of got shut down, and we've talked about it on several podcast episodes about, it's hard at any level, but especially for these college players where their seasons and careers might be done after this. We've talked about how, it might stunt the growth of some of these players who lost out on an opportunity to play in a season, but it's like you look back on, you're like, what could you have done? You had to make this decision. And it's one of those things that, you're stuck between a rock and a hard place. There's no right way out of it. You just have to make that decision and hope that things can resume as soon as possible.
Yeah, it was, I couldn't have said it any better. When Rudy Gobert tested positive in the NBA on Wednesday night, I was sitting at home fairly late at night. I knew it was done. And, 7:30 the next morning, I was on the phone with the chair of our AD group, and basically it was done. And then by 11 a.m. Mountain Time, we had issued our release, and that was it. But you're right. I mean, there's a lot that is at stake there for those athletes. The player development opportunities, and it's one thing, Alexis, to kind of take away that great moment that they're expecting. It's another thing, and I'm sure we'll get into this a little bit, but we're continuing to live in this world of uncertainty. And so not only do we take away a couple weeks where it's really important to them, we're just not sure about what type of player development opportunity could continue to happen over the summer months, and frankly, what's going to happen over the upcoming year. So that's what I think is kind of sad for those that are preparing for hopefully making it to the next level, elite athletes, because this is what they do. This is what they love to do. And, I'll tell you what, we're hyper focused on finding a way to provide those experiences, because that's what's important to them, and that's what we need to do.
I mean, you knew it was coming, but we have to then talk about how do you make some of these decisions moving forward? Again, there's so much uncertainty as to what could happen. We see football trying to figure out, their way, seasons canceling, but conferences able to decide what they want to do. I mean, how do you guys, obviously I'm sure it's a lot of communication and constant just monitoring, but how are you approaching? Because, looking at it now, we're at the end of August, you should be thinking of ramping up, right? I mean, college hockey is not too far away. I mean, how does the season look for you guys as it is right now?
Right. You all probably feel this way, and just in your lives, it's kind of like Groundhog Day, right? It's just same day. And that can feel kind of exhausting and almost feel very long. But then in the same sentence, I would say, well, here we are at the end of August. The summer is basically almost over. In the state of Minnesota, the summer is quickly approaching the end.
We should be having state fair food to wrap it up next week.
Exactly. Maybe in other places, summer continues for another month or so. But I know in Minnesota, it's starting to wrap up here. But my point is, we've gotten to the end of the summer here, and yet we still have so much uncertainty. So, what I would tell you is that we've been in very, very careful and thoughtful planning for months. This is all that we have been doing for months. There was a little bit of, okay, we canceled the tournament. I've got to figure out what the fallout is from canceling the tournament, financially and otherwise. And so that was probably a month and a half stretch to kind of close the year, so to speak, on 1920. But then we quickly shifted to 2021. And I can tell you early on in the summer or late spring, we were having discussions about, okay, what are the modifications that may need to be made for next year? I don't know that anybody was thinking, are we going to be able to play or not play? I think the concerning things were things like how many fans are going to be allowed into the venue. And we were talking with athletic directors, and obviously those are local and state decisions, but hey, if you're in a limited attendance situation, what's that impact on your program? What's that impact on your athletic department? I can tell you that as the month of June progressed and we got into July, it became a lot less about that, and it became a lot more about, can we host competition? Can we actually just play games? The fan experience, vitally important to all of us, but it became really about, can we have competition? And so we've been very kind of hyper focused, as I say, on that. And it's been probably late June into July, obviously all the way through August. And we've been building progressions of plans. I will tell you, and I don't think that this would be any earth-shattering information, our start date is October 3rd. So the NCAA tells us, based upon a prescribed formula, when the NCAA tournament is, when the start date is, for practice and competition. That's October 3rd for our sport. Women's hockey is actually earlier, into September. If you look at the basketball start date is November 10th. And so we are a month and a week before from a competition start date standpoint compared to them. So we are basically squarely in the middle of the fall season. And you've all seen what's happened with fall sports for the most part, other than I think essentially 6 FBS conferences that maybe are going to continue to try to play football this fall. Basically everything else that's kind of gone by the wayside in the fall is gone. So we've had to think through, okay, is it going to be even practical to try to play hockey in the month of October when all these other sports aren't going to be played? And what is the condition of the virus in our areas and across our society? And so, it's going to be hard to think that we can play hockey in October. I think, fairly unrealistic. So we've been building progressions of start dates. Nothing that we've said kind of publicly or with any sort of finality, but what does the progression look like if we align ourselves with basketball on some mid to late November start? And then, if that isn't going to work, what about an early January start? So it's challenging and hard, because I do want to, put out a press release that says, hey, we plan to play starting on XYZ date. My concern on doing that is if we put something out there and then let's say the basketball community comes out and says, we're not going to have competition until January 1. Well, guess what? We're going to do. We're not going to have any competition until January 1.
Right.
So it's kind of this, unique shuffle that you have to play as you kind of move down the road. And as I tell people, it's just basically one foot in front of the other, trying to get your plans in place, make decisions that you can today. But the situation is very fluid and flexible. But we do have a lot of plans that are out there that hopefully we can move to in the near future.
And for you guys, then, and you said it, but just to reiterate, your primary focus would be just to play competition, right? Like fans as much as you want them there. Because you start to see now there are some conferences or some leagues that are starting to get greedy. Like, well, I want to wait until we can have fans. It's like, well, then you're waiting a really long time for something that might never come to fruition, right? Like for you guys, it's more, let's get these guys playing, let's have some competition and get back to that normalcy before we introduce additional people in the stands.
Yeah, I think there's two components to it. I think first off is the experience for the student athlete. So whether you're a football player, hockey player, basketball, what have you. I mean, we are in this business for student development, student experience type of things. And so we want to provide them an experience. They want to play. We know that. We had a conversation actually 3 days ago. I think it's the best thing we've done in this whole process was we engaged a student leader, captain, that type of person, one per team. We let them kind of underneath the hood, so to speak, of our car to say, hey, here's our plans and our progressions. Tell me what we're missing. Tell us what you think. And the biggest thing that we heard was, we want to play. We want to do it in a safe and responsible manner. We believe and trust in the NCHC and the schools that they will do it that way, but ultimately want to play. So that's number one, experience. Number two, Jessi, is there is an economic side to this, for institutions more so than maybe the conference. And so when you start talking about, competition without fans, now you're starting to talk about significant impacts on the economics. We are a sport that's not driven financially off of large television agreements. We are a sport that's driven financially at the local level based upon what's generated through the venue, ticket sales, concessions, ancillary revenue. And so there's something very, very real to our schools if we say, hey, we're going to play competition, but we're going to play competition without fans. That's something that they have to think about. But it ultimately, I think, goes back to the first priority is, how can we provide the experience for the student athletes? So, sure. Yes, you're correct, but the economics piece certainly weighs on our minds.
Is there any economic impact, and this might be at some different schools, and I don't know how much it might affect your guys's, but with college football, with those teams saying, nope, we're not playing, what is kind of the fallout then on other programs? Because for a lot of schools and universities, football is kind of the big money driver, right? Hockey very rarely in situations is the top dog as far as revenue goes. I mean, is there a fallout ever of that or concern of anything kind of hurting programs in the future?
If you look at our conference specifically, we've got 3 institutions that play football at the Division I level. Mm-hmm. North Dakota plays at the FCS level, and then Miami and Western Michigan play Group of 5 FBS. Group of 5 FBS is heavily reliant on revenue from things like guarantee games, with Autonomy 5 conference programs, certainly revenue that they generate out of the gate, or people coming through the gate. But then also television agreements. I'm not overly familiar with, what the Missouri Valley Football Conference, which is where North Dakota is on the football side, does there. But I can tell you the Mid-American Conference have some robust television agreements with their partners like CBS and ESPN. And so, when you talk about eliminating football and not playing football games, there's something very real to the economics of those institutions that play football at that level. And so, is it concerning? Certainly it's concerning. Do I think schools are trying to adjust and make plans to continue moving forward? Absolutely. But those are some of the economics that those schools have to think about in regards to football. Then you've got the Division II level. St. Cloud State unfortunately dropped football, I think it was last year. So I think it's just Minnesota Duluth. The economics of football for them are very different than the Division I level of football. So yes, football has an impact economically. It's just a little different across our conference.
Sure. Well, I know that we are hoping that sports can get back to some kind of normal in the near future. I guess my last question would be, what is your hope here for the upcoming season or the upcoming few seasons? You kind of touched on a little bit, but if you could put it in a nutshell, what is your hope for these players and these athletes?
Rub the genie lamp, right? The genie lamp comes out and says, Josh, we're going to give you your number one wish. What does the season look like for you guys?
Well, first of all, Alexis, you asking me to think about, multiple years in the future. We live in an environment where I'm just trying to figure out what's coming next.
Okay, hour. How about tomorrow?
What Zoom call do I have next, right? Hey, back to this one foot in front of the other type of thing. So, as I look into 21, 22, goodness, I certainly hope we're back to the normal sense at that point. But for 2021, I'm just focused on providing a hockey experience to a group of student athletes that I know want to play hockey. I told the guys a couple days ago, we had the call, we need to do it because you deserve to have this experience, a little bit because of what was taken away last year, but more so because this is what you work for, this is what you do, this is what you love to do. But I told them, I said, guys, we're not going to do it if we can't do it in a safe and responsible manner. Mm-hmm. And there's a lot of things that go into that, a lot. And those are the things that weigh on our minds every single day and how we're trying to put all these plans in place. But ultimately, my hope is that we can provide them an experience that they will love. They will continue to grow as a player, especially for those that aspire to play at the next level. And just an experience that they want to have. And so that's what I'm focused on. That's what I'm hopeful for. I think we can get there. I guess time will tell. A lot of it is out of our control, but I'm a big believer that the planning and the process that's kind of gone into it at this point will lead us to an outcome that can provide that experience for those players.
Well, we certainly hope so too. Again, Josh, thank you so much for coming on, educating us. Hopefully we'll see you at the X for the Frozen Face-Off, celebrating a conference championship, and tune into NCHC TV, which we didn't really get to talk about, but that's a great thing that you guys are doing to watch games. So we sure hopefully see some action via that way. But thanks again, Josh. We appreciate it.
Thanks for having me. Great to see both of you, and keep up the great work.
Thank you. Josh. We're going to take a quick break. We'll be right back.
Hey everybody, this is producer Fred. First off, thank you very much to everybody that went out and rated Bardown Beauties on all of your podcast platforms. We really, really appreciate it. Now, let's tell everybody you know. Let's tell your friends, let's tell your mom, let's tell your grandma, let's tell your hockey coach. Let's grow Bardown Beauties podcast.
Thanks again so much to Josh. He is awesome. I really do hope that college sports, I hope all sports return, but I always had such a soft spot for college sports. Like, truly, I always go back to the Miracle quote, and it's my favorite quote, where it's like, why'd you want to play college hockey? Wasn't it obvious for the girls? No, I'm serious. Well, I wanted to win a national championship. And but that's so true, because that's what, to me, college hockey players or college athletes, like, you want to win that national title. Yeah. Like, it's not about the money. It's not about anything else but playing. Like, you just freaking love to play the game. And it's, especially in hockey, I think, where there's such limited roster space. And I want to see that opportunity for these kids to have their season, and just, it sucks. It all sucks. But Josh,
we're crossing our fingers and toes for Josh,
yes,
and all the athletes and everyone else who's constantly on the phone calls and making these decisions, because it's not an easy decision, as you heard Josh kind of go through what his life has been like these last few months. Right. But hopefully there's good things in the future, and we can have him back and talk about like actual hockey instead of like, when are you going to play? When are you not going to play? We can talk about some actual teams and players.
We can talk about UMD's three-peat. See, Duluth, I don't hate you, but
Jessi's riding the Duluth bandwagon. She's ready for the three-peat. Bring hockey back.
Bring it back. You got no Scott Perunovich, so good luck bringing it back. No. But no, again, thanks to Josh. Now, without further ado, Alexa's going to take a deep dive into her youth diary and go ahead with Dear Diary with Alexis.
Wild versus Canucks, February 14th, a little Valentine's Day action, 2010. Have you ever hated a team so much your anger turned into 2 points? Probably not, but that's what the Wild did.
And that's Dear Diary with Alexis. The sweet irony that hate is the first word out on Valentine's Day.
Classic. I was cynical even as a 10-year-old. It's just one of those things.
Always.
Also, I feel like we should have a memorial for, this is the last bedroom floor recording of Bardown Beauties. I'm moving in. By the next time we have an episode, I will be in my new apartment. So I
hope next week it's just a different color. Like, you're actually still going to sit in your closet, but it's just a different color
It's
door.
probably going to be like boxes behind me instead, because I probably won't. It'll be literally a day after I move. So, but Fred, if you can play like some dramatic music and like have, like a little like a sign on the bottom that says like Alexis's bedroom floor recording January 2020 through
yes.
August 2020.
Yeah. 100%.
R.I.P.
No, that would be good. R.I.P. Thanks again, everybody, for tuning in. We'll be back next week with another great episode, but keep sharing this one. Rate, review, love. Let us know what else you'd like to hear from. We're churning them out. So appreciate y'all listening. Have a good one.